My sister and I finished medical school together, but our parents paid off her student loans, while ignoring my cost. Growing up, Grace and I were always compared. Not directly, but it was clear. She was the perfect one, and I was just the other one. She had an ease about her that made everything seem effortless. Perfect grades, an effortless smile, the kind of person everyone admired. I, on the other hand, had to work twice as hard to get half the recognition. I wasn't lazy or less intelligent, but I never had that natural charm she exuded. I was always the quieter one, the one who would work until my fingers bled, never feeling like I could match up. Despite this, we were close. We spent late nights studying together, sharing our hopes and dreams. Both of us wanted to be doctors from a young age, a dream we built together. It was the one thing that seemed to unite us, the one thing that made me feel like we were in it together. So when we both received acceptance letters to medical school, it was a moment of triumph. It felt like we were going to achieve this dream side by side, finally earning the respect we deserved. Medical school wasn't easy. I knew it wouldn't be. But what I hadn't anticipated was how quickly the financial burden would crush me. Tuition was astronomical, and even though I had scholarships, I was left to take out loans to cover the rest. I worked hard to keep up with the rigorous schedule, spending hours in the library after class and sacrificing sleep just to stay afloat. But there was always this nagging weight in the back of my mind. The looming debt. Grace, on the other hand, seemed to be gliding through it all. Her grades were excellent, of course, and she was surrounded by friends. But I noticed something else. I noticed how much easier things were for her in every other aspect. She didn't seem as stressed about the financial burden. And when I mentioned my loans, my parents would casually tell me, "Don't worry, you're fine. You'll figure it out." One evening, after one of the many long study nights, my mom called me. "We've been talking," she said, her voice full of warmth. "We've decided to help Grace with her loans after graduation. We want her to focus on her career, not the financial burden." I smiled and nodded as she spoke, but inside, something shifted. Grace and I had both worked so hard for this, both endured sleepless nights, overwhelming pressure, and long hours of studying. And yet, she would graduate without the heavy weight of debt. I was happy for her, of course, but I couldn't shake the sting of unfairness. What about me? I pushed those feelings aside, telling myself it didn't matter. I would be fine. I had always been independent, and I could manage this on my own. But the financial strain only grew heavier. Each semester, my loan balance increased, and I found myself working extra shifts just to make ends meet. I felt isolated in my struggle, watching Grace seemingly float by without the same concerns. Graduation day arrived, and it should have been a moment of pure joy for both of us. We had made it. But the celebration felt hollow to me. As I stood next to Grace, smiling for the cameras, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Our parents were there, beaming with pride, but it felt like all of their praise and attention was directed at Grace. Every time someone mentioned her accomplishments, I found myself shrinking a little more. After the ceremony, we went out for a celebratory dinner. Our family, friends, and professors all gathered to mark the occasion, and the conversation flowed around us. As usual, Grace was the center of attention, with everyone praising her for her success. My mom, with that familiar bright smile, casually mentioned how they had helped Grace pay off her student loans. "We're just so happy to be able to do this for her," my mom said. "She's worked so hard, and now she can focus on her career without worrying about all that debt." My stomach churned. I had worked just as hard, put in just as many hours, and yet I was still buried under the weight of my loans. My heart raced, and I could feel the bitterness rising inside me. I had to say something. "Wait," I blurted out, my voice trembling. "What about me? I'm struggling with my loans too. Why didn't you help me like you helped Grace?" The table went silent. Grace looked at me, her eyes wide, but she said nothing. My parents exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. "Honey," my dad said, finally breaking the silence, "you've always been so independent. We thought you'd be fine on your own. Grace. She had more trouble with everything, and we wanted to help her get through it." That was it. The unspoken truth I had been living with all these years had finally come to the surface. I wasn't the strong, independent daughter who could handle everything on her own. I needed help too. I had always needed help, but it was never offered. It was always assumed that I could handle it. "I needed help too," I said, my voice trembling. "I've been working nonstop, taking on extra shifts, just to make sure I can pay off my loans. And you never once asked me if I was okay. You just assumed I could do it." My mom looked at me with a pained expression, her voice soft as she spoke. "We didn't mean to hurt you, honey. We didn't realize how much you were struggling. We thought you had it under control." "That's the problem," I shouted, the emotions I had been holding back spilling out. I was never given a chance to ask for help. I never felt like I could. I was always supposed to be the strong one. But I wasn't. I was drowning, and no one ever asked. The tension in the room was thick, and for the first time, I saw my parents' expressions change. The guilt was clear in their eyes. They hadn't seen me. They hadn't seen how hard I was working, how much I was sacrificing. They had always seen me as the one who didn't need help, the one who could handle anything. Grace finally spoke, her voice quiet but full of understanding. "I never knew," she said softly. "I didn't know you were struggling like this. I thought you were doing okay." "I was faking it," I said, my voice breaking. "I was pretending everything was fine, because that's what I thought. You wanted, but I wasn't okay. And now I'm just so tired of pretending." The silence lingered for a moment before my dad cleared his throat. "We're sorry, honey," he said, his voice filled with regret. "We didn't see it. We should have. We just assumed, and we're sorry. We will help you. We'll do whatever we can to make things right." The words didn't erase the years of feeling unseen, but they were a start. It wasn't about the money. It was about the validation, the acknowledgement that I wasn't invisible. My parents had failed to see me, but at least now they understood. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally seen, not as the strong, independent daughter, but as a person who had struggled and needed help too. Epilogue. Moving forward. The weeks that followed were filled with difficult conversations, but also healing. My parents began to make amends, offering to help with my student loans as best as they could, though it wasn't a quick fix. It wasn't enough to erase the pain, but it was a start. As for Grace, things between us shifted too. We talked about the unspoken tension that had existed for years, the ways we had each tried to live up to expectations. We both had struggled, but in different ways. And in that moment, we both realized that our paths didn't need to be compared. We weren't competing for our parents' approval anymore. We were two individuals, both deserving of love, support, and recognition in our own right. The journey wasn't easy. It took time, and there were many bumps along the way. But we both came to understand that family isn't about perfection. It's about seeing each other, truly seeing each other, and offering support when it's needed, no matter what form it takes. And for me, that was enough. Thanks for watching. Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more stories.